Alrighty. Good morning, all. We are at week 7 of the academy, which I feel like every week I'm like, oh, it's so crazy that we're at another week. Somehow time just keeps going. But I feel like 7 and 8 weeks, like that's a good time to be together. So we appreciate you continuing to show up here and learning about safe routes. So today, we're going to be talking about implementation. So really thinking through once you get the foundation, do your engagement work, really understand what is needed, where those gaps are, where the priorities are within your school district for either an encouragement event or an education event or engineering needs. Then it's, well, how do we do this? And when we were creating this academy, we really wanted to think through, there's a lot of the Safe Routes to School plans that take place, but then how do we continue this work going forward? Who are those partners? How do we find funding? And then how do we sustain the work? And as you see, next week we'll be talking about how we sustain it. But today is all about implementation. Okay, the agenda welcomes, talk about implementation, have a local highlight story, and then a call to action. So in the chat, if you put your name, your district, and if you could get on a plane to go anywhere, where would you go right now? Where would you take your vacation? It might be because it's the end of February and it's cold out and it's snowing here in the cities. It might be because some teammates are going on a warm vacation tomorrow, but let's know where you would go if you got to go on a plane. Or we can say plane, train, car. I know some people don't like flying as well, but put that in the chat and we will continue on. Alrighty, so last week, our call to action, hopefully some of you were able to do this, but the action was to go for a walk. This could have been to your school, could have been to a park, to a community center, and just in your neighborhood. And we were encouraging you to think through this within a engineering lens. So was it easy to cross the intersections? Was the route convenient, or did you have to go down 3 blocks to be able to cross safely? Would you be comfortable walking with a child or an elderly family member, somebody that uses a wheelchair or other assisted devices, and any other experience that you had while going on this walk? So I'm hoping that 2 of you can come off mute and share that you went on the walk and then your experience of that. Yeah, Andy.
Well, being in Duluth, we actually got hit by a pretty bad snowstorm this last week, and even though school was out of session, they actually closed all district buildings with how bad it was. But I was able to get out and walk around even just my neighborhood, and it took days, absolute days to even access the sidewalk up here, let alone trying to cross the street. I mean, observing bus stops, they're just giant snowbanks up here right now. We're about a week out from it, and there has been very little movement on trying to get the snow out of bus stops, and our walk zones are just as low priority, it seems.
And now school's back in session too. So even when it was not in session, it maybe could have been okay,
Yeah.
but now it's kiddos are
Yep.
still walking.
Yeah.
Thanks for
I
sharing,
mean,
Andy.
yeah, I've also had a parent reach out that they have a student in a wheelchair, and with our transportation for students with special needs, they do direct stops in front of their house, and the family constantly has to clear the snowbank, and then the city keeps putting snow back. And they've reached out, and the city says, we're going to keep doing it. Sorry.
Well, thank you for sharing. And going on a walk, maybe because you couldn't take a car out because you had so many snowbanks and so much snow. Anyone else want to share? One more person? If you hadn't gone on the walk, what walk would you have done, or what can you do going forward, maybe in the spring with partners? All right, I'm gonna let you off the hook only because I've had caffeine this morning. So I'm gonna continue on, and maybe all of your caffeine's gonna kick in and you can chime in for the other times. But Luke did put in the chat that he prefers to do the walks in the autumn. It's not too hot. I agree. And it's just beautiful in Minnesota in the autumn. Alrighty, so today again, we're gonna be talking about implementation. And what that means and what it looks like within the Safe Routes to School program. At any point, if you have questions, raise your hand, come off mute, or put it in the chat and we'll respond while we talk. So we wanted to think through this again of why or how is the best way to implement like a Safe Routes to School plan. As you know, from the visualization tool, we have hundreds and hundreds of Safe Routes to School plans across the state. And we don't want them to sit on the shelf. We want them to be implemented. We want them to be utilized. And how can we do that, and how can we make it sustainable? So first, thinking through, or we're just going to talk through some stuff. So for leveraging partners, what are those benefits? We often hear that when talking about a local school, Safe Routes to School team, specifically at the school site, so district staff or teachers, they're at max capacity and they don't have the time and effort to do some of the Safe Routes to School planning implementation. So that's where we can leverage partners based on their experience, based on their knowledge or scope of work to be able to continue to implement the Safe Routes to School plan. By leveraging partners, you have shared accountability. So in the plan, you can say, for this short-term strategy, it's going to be the district. For this short-term strategy, it's actually going to be the city that should be painting the crosswalks. In this short-term strategy, it should be XYZ. So there's that shared ownership and accountability, so it's not all on a PE teacher. It also allows for expanded resources. So again, staffing, funding, time, in-kind support. So maybe there's not a transactional monetary exchange, but they are using their time and effort within their position to support that implementation. There's an increased reach across audiences. So schools, really good at talking about schools, talking to students, teachers, and so forth. But parks and rec, maybe reaching a different audience. City planners, maybe reaching a different audience as well. And then linking it back to the goals within the SHIP program, there's really strong policy and system changes when you can leverage partners across many systems. Speaking of SHIP, I hope a lot of you on this call already know this, or all of you, but Statewide Health Improvement Partnership is so unique to Minnesota and really has allowed this program to be as successful as it is because there is partnership across state agencies, across counties, cities, tribal nations, and so forth. So there's 87 counties and 10 tribal nations that receive funding from SHIP to do this work. And within the realm of Safe Routes to School, it could be looking at facilitation and organization of a Safe Routes to School team. Could be helping with updating their plans. SHIP's budget is, I know, small, but it could be helping with funding potential projects or needs. They're really good at supporting wellness policies, updating it, sitting on your local school wellness policy. I know SHIP partners who have helped write grants for them, both creation, ideation, submitting of grants for local partners, and really being a letter of support. So even if you were to put grants in, your local SHIP coordinator could write, or the local public health department could help with those letters of support, which from a perspective of from a Minnesota or MnDOT application, that is really helpful knowing that there's that connection between partners. For the folks on the call that are on SHIP, because I know there's a few of you, is there anything else as to how you've helped implement Safe Routes in your community that maybe isn't listed on the slide? or you have questions of how you could do it as a SHIP partner?
I have hosted and applied to host Walk Bike Fun curriculum training days. And Luke's chiming in too. I've done some grant writing too and letters of support.
Thanks, Kristen. A lot of grant writing. Yeah. Great. Thank you all. Another partner is the healthcare realm of partnerships across the counties and cities. This might look like somebody within the city-county partnerships, injury prevention specialists. If you have bigger hospitals or trauma centers within your community, that might be somebody, community health and public health. And this could be for volunteering, promotion and communications of trainings and things that are taking place, but also it's a great way to receive helmet donations. As you know from our programming, our grantees cannot purchase helmets to then do a giveaway. The healthcare realm is a really, really great way if you're looking for helmet donations from that perspective, prevention perspective. Public Works and Engineering, again, another key partner in the team. These are ones that is really essential to have on your team. As you probably know by now, they really will help with that physical environmental change that has been identified through engagement and data collection. They also have their own plans, their own priorities, their own budget, and sometimes you can overlay Safe Routes to School priorities with city and county partners' priorities as well. This could look like installing or repairing sidewalks, crosswalks, if you have some bike rack gaps, some safety projects potentially, and use for data collection. Planners, so this is thinking larger from Greater Minnesota has RDOs, MPOs, partners. Minneapolis has Met Council, but also has city planners and such. But the planning team is really also helpful as a leveraged partner. They can help prioritize funding. They can help a lot with like those heat maps you need, or speed studies, or supporting in the grant writing. They could also be the person helping write the grant writing or being the recipient of it to help within your community. So we love our planners. Local law enforcement. I know we had a conversation early on in the academy about we removed the enforcement E. We included it in the encouragement E instead. We did want to call out that the change in those E's does not mean that local law enforcement isn't included or welcome in our program. There's several ways that these partners still help build community partnerships and trust among communities for Safe Routes to School, and they can help a lot with certain activities. So they can help a lot with crossing guards, bike rodeos, walking school buses, if they need event days with traffic control, and then other ones like speed radars, grants, things like that. So even though it's not, enforcement is not a big E, law enforcement partners are still a part of our program and are welcomed. And then local school, Safe Routes to School team. This is thinking more at that site level or district level. These are the on-the-ground partners who support that culture change. If you don't know who your Safe Routes to School local team is, you can look in your Safe Routes to School plan, and they usually have 1 to 3 folks from that school site listed in the Safe Routes to School plan that was engaged within the planning process, and you could look for them. I did want to call out if a school or your community does have PTA, PTOs, this is a really great group to tap into and request support for Safe Routes to School. In the past, they've helped with data collection, observations, event planning. If you have gaps within a funding need, they can help with that fundraising event, bikes, helmets, traffic guard, and so forth. And then they can also, if they're aware of your program, aware of Safe Routes within that community, continue to be that voice when being on at school board meetings in the community and so forth. Last one in this little section is just wanted to call a couple other partners that maybe you've considered, maybe you haven't, that support Safe Routes. So transit agencies really supporting that first and last mile connection. So bus stops, trains, so forth. In the metro, there are programs that have reduced fares for youth to attend. I know in Minneapolis, high schoolers, I think, have it free to ride transit to school because the yellow buses do not pick up high schoolers, as an example. Local businesses, again, they can provide support and scholarships, in-kind donations, promote something in front of their store through signage. And one of the key examples would be like partnering with a local bike shop to help with that maintenance of that bike fleet for the sustainability. Nonprofits, really thinking through that community engagement and the advocacy for policy change. Oftentimes it is needed, but a lot of us can't do policy or advocacy work based on our position. So using nonprofits like MN, for example, People for Bikes, things like those organizations can help with that policy change. And then elected officials, so they can champion funding. They could, if they understand the program and the needs and that want from that community, they can be that voice that elevates those community voices. They can support different programs and so forth. And as we chatted through in the encouragement, the event days is a really, really great way to have the elected officials attend and see what that impact can be. Instead of one day event, what if we did it every day that kids could walk to school? Okay, I know I went through that a little fast. I know Luke said, oh, he was talking about grant writing and just how it's a great way to strengthen partnerships and help direct more resources to your community for capacity for grant writing. Couldn't agree more. All right, before we go into the grant writing conversation, are there any other local partners that we missed that you want to highlight from your community or any questions that you have? Kelly, did I miss anything from our end?
No, I can just get maybe some ideation going on other Safe Routes to School team members that might be non-traditional. I think one that we hear about that's really helpful in communities is the cross-country coach or the cross-country advisor. They have those kids running on every single sidewalk across the town. So they have a really good understanding of where there might be barriers or challenges in the built environment. And that's something I never would have thought about before doing some safe routes planning with different communities. So if you can't get a lot of people together for a walk audit, maybe chat with your cross-country team folks.
Thanks. Anyone else? Okay. We will continue on. All right, so we are going to chat now through grants and funding. When we created this academy in last summer as the first phase, we had it, the topic was just like all about grants. And we felt both from like current funding opportunities across the board. In other ways, we wanted to shape it more of the implementation can think about grants, but also can think about other ways to support that. But we did want to chat through some grants just because if you're new to grant writing, it might be helpful. So when we chat through grants, there's some terminology that you may have heard before, you may have not heard before. MnDOT loves an acronym. I think every organization loves a good acronym. So this is what we mean when we say the things we say. So leverage funds, this is anything from money to resources to in-kind contributions that come from a different source than the organization that is the primary grant recipient. The leverage funds can make the project more competitive and can also demonstrate that community investment. So we're often looking for that leverage fund. It just shows that buy-in. Solicitation is a formal announcement that a funding agency or organization is opening applications for a project. This solicitation often is a document that outlines eligibility, requirements, deadline, and how to apply. An RFP is a request for proposal. This is a specific type of solicitation in which an agency outlines the need or a project. So we the agency has had the ideation, has the idea of what project is needed, but is asking for external folks to submit their RFP of how they believe their proposal of how they would meet the needs of that RFP. Includes selection, timeline, scope of work. Procurement is the process of acquiring goods, purchasing items that follows the state or organization's policies. Each organization has different procurement processes we will just call out. So it is important to think through what those are outlined. And if you've been a recipient of a MnDOT, you know ours is a very robust procurement process. LOI is a letter of intent. So specifically for infrastructure grants program, they put out an LOI solicitation, so letter of intent. They want to know if applicants are interested in applying for the funding. So if they get 5 LOIs, maybe it's not as interesting as if they get 80 LOIs, and then they would know kind of how many applicants would come through. And this is, you typically outline the project concept, the scope, but this is before submitting a full proposal. It is helpful if there's an LOI solicitation to do it, because most times you will get feedback back of either adjust this, or this is great, or you're missing this. LOS, letter of support. This is a document from a partner, stakeholder, elected official that supports or endorses the project or application. Again, this really shows that collaboration and that community buy-in. And for Safe Routes MnDOT grants, we request 2 letters of support. A hot tip, if it's a school partner or a city partner, having that organization's header and footer on those letters of support is great. Otherwise, it just looks like a Word document. So a little bit more formal is very much appreciated from our team. And then cost share. Sometimes grants ask for a cost share. MnDOT, Safe Routes to School, non-infrastructure, there is not a cost share. But like the TAP program that Kelly will chat through in a little bit does have a cost share. So that means that a portion of the project is covered by the applicant or another funding source. So it might be a 20% cost share or a 10% cost share. And this could be potentially cash contribution. So just matching the dollar to dollar. Sometimes it could be an in-kind contribution of staff time, volunteering, donation, materials, and so forth. So looking at that applications, what's the right word? Document of like outlining it all, should outline in there what the cost share is that they're looking for. Okay, selecting schools and projects. We just wanted to give a little highlight of if you're applying for Safe Routes to School, what are some things to consider? So for selecting schools and projects, the STEP score is really a great starting point and identifies high need communities. It gives you that range. We've already kind of done the calculation of the diversity factors that might be in place. Really thinking about this partner's readiness is also critical for success, right? If some person puts in the application, but the school is not ready to do any project, there might be some barriers to implementation. So thinking through, is there a school that needs a little bit of extra support? Or are there ways in which we could do a project that will be really the most achievable? Thinking through alignment, looking for windows of opportunity. If there's already a road construction taking place by a school, maybe you could also add a different project into overlap, or adding it just into their project could be cheaper and faster than you trying to find funds alone. Just trying to make sure everything else. Yeah, and just thinking through like when selecting a project, really Safe Routes to School is best when you have the preliminary data, you have those ongoing partnerships, and then making sure that timing works for that upcoming grant cycle. Preps for applying, conversations with key partners. This might look like having conversations 6 to 12 months out before an application comes out. Thinking through aligning goals, aligning projects, could inform that either you're going to need a letter of support or in-kind donation for your application, allows those partners to prepare. As we talked through in the evaluation week, gathering all that information and data prior to it really does only strengthen your application. And then having a Safe Routes to School plan in place if you are looking for additional funding other than a Safe Routes to School plan, that is helpful. I know for the infrastructure funding in MnDOT, it is required that you have a Safe Routes to School plan within the last 10 years. Is that correct, Kelly? Great. Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I was like, I have these notes. I just want to make sure. In addition, for the infrastructure, oftentimes they require also some type of sidewalk policy within communities for that. So just understanding what is needed and being able to prepare so that when the application comes out, you are ready to go. From our experience of grant writing, Kelly, myself, through many SHIP grant writes, some tips that we've learned with community is be specific. Don't say furniture if you can say recliner, right? Or couch or coffee table. So if you're looking for education with Safe Routes to School, is it walk, bike, fun education? Is it a bike fleet? Is it XYZ? What do you need? Review, and review. Thinking through your idea of what that pitch is, what the project is going to be, and then letting other people read it and review it and being like, oh, you're missing this, or I don't fully understand this, to really think through what is the most comprehensive application that we can give that is clear to what we want. Use the grant guide, the FAQs or the webinars that are available to you. Those are created to help you be most successful in your application. Varying your letters of support is very appreciated and will only be more supportive for your application. So thinking through, is it a principal? Is it a local public health? Is it a city partner, planner, park director, and so forth? Detailed past work really shows the likelihood that your project that you're pitching is going to be successful. And a note for this is at the same grade. So if you're pitching or trying to apply for an application that is at a smaller level, $1,000 grant project, and there's not that many requirements, then and the grant application that you're applying for matches that, great. But if you're applying for something that is more $50,000 and has more procurement requirements and so forth, being able to have examples that also match that $50,000 range or those requirements is really helpful for the reviewers to have confidence that you will be successful in that project implementation. And then lastly, using data. I feel like a little bit of a broken record at this point, but the data justifies it. It justifies the need. It brings in the community voice, and it really says it's not that I'm sitting at county or central office thinking about this idea. It is, this is what the community needs, and we have that data to support that. Okay, last one, and then I'm passing it to Kelly. We just wanted to share some grant writing resources. I won't go through the list. Kelly will drop the links for them. But if you're interested and want to strengthen your grant writing, these are some really, really great ones, both for, oh, you already dropped them, great. Both for Safe Routes to School programs, but also really any community program that you're trying to submit for. Okay. Any thoughts or questions before I toss it to Kelly? Okay.
I thought
Kelly,
of two more grant tips while you were talking, Sophia, that I was just going to throw out since we have a little time of when you're doing a budget. Another thing I've seen when I've done a lot of grant writing and other reviewers are certainly more favorable when a budget kind of has wonky numbers instead of like 600, 200, 1,000, 1,500, like really round numbers versus like $647 and $353. I think with a lot of the additional oversight that's coming down on grants, at least at a state and probably federal level, having a little bit more specific and detailed of what you're hoping to purchase instead of just $10,000 worth of incentives, I think is going to really make for a stronger application. And if you're worried about ooh, I want to have some flexibility in budget, add another one. So if you're like, I want to buy 4 bike racks, put 5 bike racks in there in the grant application. I want to buy 10-yard signs, put 20-yard signs in there. And that's going to give you a little bit of a buffer, but you've done the due diligence of like finalizing or firming up what those numbers are. That's always good for grants. I don't remember the other things, so we're going to keep going. All right, so federal grants. We have state grants, and there's a lot of good options there. We do have federal grants. One that has been around for a while is called Transportation Alternatives Program. So this is federal funding that comes through. I'm specifically talking about Greater Minnesota, so the 80 counties outside the metro or outside the Met Council's realm of control. And the nice thing about this is it is sent to MnDOT district offices, and then those regions review the applications, score them, and determine who's funding. So you don't have someone from Minneapolis sitting and determining if Warren or Mankato or Mountain Lake should be funded. It is local partners, local engineers, local planners who have some context and can better understand, yeah, this is going to be a really good regional asset for us. The one thing to note here is while this is has been available every February, this does require a 20% match. So for our small communities that don't have a big tax base, or they're hiring out their engineer instead of a staff engineer, these type of federal grants can be kind of challenging. There's certainly some opportunities or creative funding to help with that 20% match. And the League of Minnesota Cities has some grant writing funding and cost share match funding too. Next one. So if you are in the 7-county metro area, Transportation Alternatives Program is mushed with other funding in the metro area, including the active transportation sales tax. And instead of doing an annual solicitation for their TAP funds, they push it all together and do it once every other year. So that funding is coming up this spring and will be open for a while before applications are submitted. There's not a Safe Routes to School like specific category, but it's within the bike and walk section. And you'll be able to put comments or notations related to Safe Routes to School. For the first time ever, this is both infrastructure, but can also support Safe Routes to School planning grants, Vision Zero grants, safety action plans, and things like that. Next slide. Another federal funding that I just checked the website still says that they're planning to hold a grant solicitation in 2026. So federal funds for bike and walk. There's 3 categories. So for bike and walk, it can be for planning. So again, it can do a Safe Routes to School plan. It can do, maybe you want to do an active transportation plan countywide or between a few communities. It can do demonstration grants. So if you have a project and you want to show what a neighborhood roundabout would be, and that, the neighborhood can get around it, and emergency vehicles can get around it, the demonstration grants are available. And then of course there's also the infrastructure grants. Infrastructure is a scotch more competitive than planning and demonstration grants. The one thing I want to tell you, this is big, is if you are in, a lot of times we kind of pull ourselves out of the running. So we're like, we're not a small town. We're not a rural community. We have 50,000 people. Think on a federal level, Minneapolis of 450,000 people is considered a small city on a federal scale. So anything under Minneapolis's 450,000 people is considered a small city or probably a rural community. And those have more chances of being funded at a federal level if you can come up with the 20% cost share or match. So just know that when you're looking at federal funds, you're like, how am I going to compete against Miami and New York City? You're not. You're competing against other small communities of a similar size to yours. And there's a growing appetite to see more of this work in small and rural communities or tribal lands. Strider Foundation it has a great package for a bike fleet to get a bike fleet of Strider bikes and a curriculum, teacher training, and a couple years of a warranty. Really great to get some of those early bike education going in kind of like K, first, second grade. Maybe it's good for an after school program or a summer program or a child care after school type program. But every school that's gotten these has found them to be a really big hit. And you can see from the smiles on the faces there that kiddos agree. The next one, I believe, is AARP's Community Challenge Grants. These are great for community walk and bikeability. It might help you get bike racks at the library or the park, maybe benches along a walk route so that people have places to stop and rest as they're walking. It might be, you know, other crossing safety or artistic crosswalk or other things like that. So lots of good ideas that you can select from their website, and that one has been open every year for several years. So if it's not this year, you can talk with your partners and plan for next year. The next one is Outride Riding for Focus grant. So this is a great way to get more like bikes and helmets, training and technical assistance for your school or community to put some more curriculum out there. And we have known several local communities who have been successful with that. And then Bloomberg also has an asphalt art initiative, which they can help pilot some artful crosswalks and other opportunities to pilot more art in our public space. I believe that's it. So back to you, Sophie.
Great. Does anyone have any follow-up on federal? No? Okay. You're a quiet group today. That's okay. All right, we're gonna chat through some state. Luke says the federal are not fun grants to write. No, they're not. Okay, we're gonna chat through state grants again. So this is really thinking through, majority of it is our Minnesota Safe Routes to School program. So there are two types of grant programs for our group. There's non-infrastructure and there's infrastructure grant programs. Kelly and I are within the non-infrastructure, and then our state aid office is the infrastructure grant manager. All of our grant making uses a step score for that equitable decision making and grant making. And then generally the timeline is a fall winter solicitation, spring notification, contracting process that does take a little bit of time with a July notice to proceed. And then usually our grants are 1 year and they end the following June. We are planning a next solicitation for fall or late of 2026. In the next slides, we will call out what is going to be planned for that solicitation so that you can be up to date. So the first one, planning assistance grant, it is the foundation of our program. It is very successful. So it's a comprehensive plan for our schools and our community. It could be one site, district-wide, and so forth. For our Safe Routes to School plans, Greater Minnesota, these are completed by our RDOs. And then for the 7-county metro, we have a consultant that helps complete those plans within the metro counties. The grant types really are to meet your needs. So if you say, I really just have one school that I want to focus on a Safe Routes to School plan for, great. Or if you have a consolidated school district and it's really on only one site, that is still eligible. You could also think through if you're a district that has 13 sites, you can do a district-wide plan, and that plan would then cover the 16 of them. Or the 13 of them. And then in the plan, it covers all the E's that we've talked through. It does the engagement, the data collection, the analysis, thinking through the short-term, long-term strategies of implementation. And then it gives you a pretty plan that then you can implement. So for this, the next solicitation will take place this fall, so fall of 26. And if your community has just started out in Safe Routes to School, interested, want to dip their toe in the water, this is a really, really great option for them. The next type of grant that we are planning to have for fall of 27, so not this fall, but next. This is again dependent on the contingent if we can acquire funds for this from a legislative level. But We've had 2 rounds now of district coordinator grants, and this is really to put a position within the school districts to rapidly implement safe routes to school. As we know, sometimes it's one teacher does this little thing and another does this and a community partner does this, but we have seen, based on the last 2 rounds, that having a coordinator position, a designated person within that district to help with that implementation has been really, really, really successful. Usually the grants are 3 years, and then just wanted to call out those current districts that have the grant. So Brooklyn Center, Duluth, Richfield, Rochester, and St. Paul. Kelly, do you have anything on this one? Great. Thinking through infrastructure side of the program, there is a infrastructure solicitation that will take place this fall. It is an active transportation infrastructure, but Safe Routes to School projects are eligible underneath it. So there's not a specific Safe Routes to School one this coming round. But it helps. Past grantees have been able to close sidewalk gaps, trails, improve crossing signage, and things like that. If you have questions, let us know. We're happy to answer those. And we'll just call out for the Minnesota Safe Routes infrastructure, there is not a funding match. So unlike the TAP, that there is that funding match, our program does not have that, which is great. Okay, 2 other ones that are not in our program right now, or not in our program, but we wanted to call out is both SHIP. So they are in SHIP 6, I believe. If a SHIP person's on the call and that is incorrect, let me know, but I believe you're 6. And Active Living Context, Safe Routes to School program, thanks, Kristen, is eligible. So I know their budgets are probably finalized now. There was work this summer to get those kind of laid out, but there might be small pods of funding to think through plant updates, maybe a feedback sign, wayfinding signage, bike fleet, so forth, and especially that in-kind staff time from our SHIP folks to support our local communities. Generally speaking, for like plan updates, they're usually 5 to 10. Safe Routes is the update portion of it, not a full plan. Mobile feedback signs usually are under 5K. And then wayfinding signage is allowable under SHIP and has been funded in the past. So just a few examples if that is what your community is looking for. Last one is the DNR No Child Left Inside. They just closed the last solicitation round, but their next one they had on their website is for October. There has been many successful schools receiving this grant. So this is through the state agency, and really is wanting to expand this connection of youth outside. What we have seen is when thinking through the grant in the scope of Safe Routes to School, it is you need to make a really good case of how the bikes are going to allow for the students to experience nature. So is it biking to nature centers and bikes as your mode of transportation? Biking to parks, experiencing winter seasons through fat tire bike fleets and things like that. So just being really clear as to what you're asking for with those bikes, if biking is the thing that you're interested in. Okay, a few others, and then we might end a little bit early, we'll see. Regional and local funding opportunities. So again, we started with federal, state, and now we really wanted to think through, are there capacities at the regional, local level that can still help with your implementation? The answer is yes. So a few of them include city and county have capital improvement programs. Often these fund sidewalks, crosswalks, traffic calming. So you could think through while you build that partnership with your city county planners, seeing when that next SIP is coming through, can you put some of that Safe Routes to School priorities in there? Local public health, again, those SHIP partners are just foundational to the success of this program. Kevin, were you coming off to ask a question, or do you just wanted to say hello? I was hoping for a question.
Just a hello.
Okay. All right, another one that maybe you're familiar with, maybe you're not, is the 6 Minnesota Initiative Foundations. These are independent entities that are built to respond to those regional needs and opportunities. So for each of the rural regions, there's one within your region, and they can help with grants, business loans, programs, donor services, and so forth. So if you are not familiar with the one in your region, we will put the list of all of these in there. But just know that there are those local foundations that could help support if it's, again, in kind, letter of support, potentially some donations, and so forth. This is an example of the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation. They currently have a program that's called the Small Town Grant Program. And within that, there's been many examples of ways that they have still advanced bike ridership or mobility of walking and biking. And you compare that with Safe Routes to School. It's a little bit more of a community perspective, but we'll take it. So some examples, they've expanded adaptive cycling opportunities. They expanded their wellness committee within their school, park accessibility, so linking both Safe Routes to School and parks program, new signage, wayfinding, and so forth. And then they were able to install a pedestrian multi-use trail. So again, that's way more on the infrastructure side of things, but all really great examples of connectivity. As we know, kids do more than just go to school. A couple other Minnesota focused foundations that maybe are within your region that support both with leadership and project funding. So just wanted to call those out. Service organization is also a really, really great partnership. If you haven't connected with those, specifically in Greater Minnesota. We know, for example, they often support local efforts for children, even making like $1,000 donation to support a fundraising and such, to take some of that gap of funding needs off your plate. So if you don't have a connection with them, we highly encourage that. Is there any other local ones from all of you that we maybe don't know or that you've had in partnership? All right.
Hey, this is Chris.
Yay. Hi, Chris.
Hi. One I want to point out too is sometimes there are like business-oriented foundations that give. So I just give like one quick example. In Southwest Minnesota, it's called Ottertail Power. It's I know it's this big, right, electric power company, right, that provides electricity. So if your city is powered by Ottertail Power, they have a foundation, and they typically give grant awards from $1,000 to $5,000. And active, healthy living or education is one of their core things. So, I guess I suggest looking at that like electrical service co-ops, or sometimes electricity companies. Those types of organization or those types of for-profit businesses sometimes.
Thanks, Chris. Luke put in the chat that the Lions helped with Bike Repair Day. Julian, I see you're off mute.
I'll just plug also the Good Neighbor Fund. They do some good work, especially in coordination with local neighborhood associations in the city of Minneapolis. Chat.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else? Great. So the local highlight story then is similar to all that we are talking about today, but this is an example with South St. Paul. So 3M, very large organization. I don't even know if large covers it, but they wanted to test out some new reflective materials that they had, and they wanted to create a staff volunteer day. So they reached out to St. Paul Public Schools and said, hey, we have this want, we have identified within our organization. Is this something that you would be interested in? St. Paul Public Schools said yes. And they worked together to identify that school with the highest need, identify the school that was engaged with Safe Routes to School, and that would utilize a project like a traffic garden. And then the 3M staff came in and painted it. You can see it on this picture. And the school was able to benefit from a traffic garden that they use both during the school year and during summer. So this is just a really great example of, again, it wasn't a grant, but it was a community partnership, and there's both benefits from that 3M, that organization, along with that school district to implement it. And it's just beautiful. All righty, friends, I'm going to give you some time back today. So we have one call to action for the week. We are asking you to complete the academy evaluation. It should be very quick, 5 minutes or less. Every feedback that we get from that, we will shape for the next academy, which we'll be having this summer. We're going to try to have one more before that conference this fall. So please complete that. And I hope you have a really great rest of your day. We'll give you 7 minutes back, and we'll stay on if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.